Greetings, friends. I am Vitaly Polyukin. Last night, India and Pakistan exchanged airstrikes amid increasing tension and hostility between these two nuclear states following a terrorist attack in the Indian part of Kashmir. It became clear that such an escalation could occur in the first hours after the terrorist attack in Kashmir, when New Delhi blamed Pakistan for the incident and stated that the terrorist act would not go unanswered. Some observers hoped that it would all end with belligerent rhetoric. And perhaps that is why President Donald Trump's administration did not take any decisive steps to prevent the escalation. Even after learning about India's strikes on Pakistan, President Trump stated that he expects the situation in the region to end soon, and that India and Pakistan have been fighting each other for many years, as he put it, for decades and centuries. However, the very logic of the belligerent rhetoric and the promises of revenge that were voiced in the speeches of Indian politicians and media throughout the days following the terrorist act, of course, no longer allowed Prime Minister Narendra Modi to refrain from a real strike on the territory of the Pakistani part of Kashmir. Moreover, for the first time since the early 70s, the strike was carried out on the territory of Pakistan that India recognizes as part of the neighboring state, that is, on the so-called sovereign territory of Pakistan, from India's point of view, which is another important signal of the escalating tension. India claims that it carried out precise strikes on targets where militants are located or where their infrastructure exists. In Pakistan, of course, they speak of an unprovoked strike on residential areas, mosques, and madrasas. In response, Pakistan carried out its own strikes on the Indian part of Kashmir and claimed that 5 Indian aircraft were shot down. In India itself, there are already reports that 3 aircraft crashed during the attack on Pakistan, although no details of these incidents are provided. And so far, the Indian government has not confirmed this information in its own media. Now, the most important thing is what will happen after the exchange of these airstrikes. In Islamabad, they are already saying that they are ready to stop if India stops. And this has happened repeatedly in the relations between New Delhi and Islamabad, an exchange of airstrikes followed by a search for ways to de-escalate the situation. But it is not at all necessary that the situation will develop according to the same logic in the coming hours and days. Let me remind you that there were expectations once again that this time there would be no strike, that everything would be limited primarily to belligerent rhetoric and border skirmishes, but certainly not strikes on Pakistani territory by India. At the same time, it is necessary to consider the factor that India is currently much stronger militarily than Pakistan. However, the nuclear arms parity between the two countries remains. And for this reason, Islamabad is making it clear that they might resort to using nuclear weapons if the very existence of Pakistan is threatened. It is precisely in the attempt to destroy the Pakistani state that the Pakistani government is currently accusing India. A great deal will depend, of course, on international pressure on both countries. The United States Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, has already spoken with Indian and Pakistani officials, but this is not his first conversation. He has already held consultations which however, were unable to prevent the Indian attack on Pakistan and Pakistan's response to India. Indeed, it is important to understand the authority of the current administration of the President of the United States in both New Delhi and Islamabad, and to what extent these countries will consider the advice and wishes from the White House, and most importantly, how interested the United States is in offering its mediation services at all right now. We have repeatedly encountered situations where a new administration practically showed a complete lack of interest in participating in the resolution of the most important international conflicts. This is a question that will need to be answered once again in the coming hours and days, especially since there are quite a few players interested in the conflict escalating. Among these players, that are Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping, who will be meeting in the Russian capital in the coming hours. It might be important for Putin that the India-Pakistan war diverts attention from his own war in Ukraine. And Xi Jinping might be interested in the instability in India, demonstrating that American entrepreneurs should not consider relocating their production to this country. From China's perspective, India should cease to be a safe haven for American business. And of course, this will also contribute to how China's economy will develop. And by the way, to how the Chinese delegation will behave in the already scheduled negotiations in Geneva with American representatives, with the United States Secretary of the Treasury. I would like to remind you that these will be the first negotiations after Washington and Beijing decided on practically prohibitive barriers for their own products, which is a serious problem for the economic development of both the United States and the People's Republic of China. And China is expected to soften its position and agree to many of the demands that could be put forward towards China by the President of the United States, Donald Trump. But again, if it turns out that without Chinese cooperation, American entrepreneurs simply cannot exist at the moment, then China's behavior will be much tougher towards the United States. And this in turn will depend on how the situation in the conflict between India and Pakistan develops in the coming hours and days, and whether the two countries, which have been hostile to each other for decades, will stop. Here, Donald Trump is absolutely right. Of course, on the brink of another abyss after the exchange of airstrikes that we all witnessed last night. No one can say for sure now that prudence may prevail. Thank you, friends. Stay on this channel, subscribe to it, follow my social media and the Patreon channels, which help develop these resources, and use the sponsorship feature on YouTube itself. Peace to you.